Sheep binding. Under this head are principally included school books and such others as require only inferior bindings. For sheep is of much too indifferent a quality for works of a superior description. With this process we shall commence exactly where we did with boarding, with the exception that instead of backing, the first thing now to be noticed is cutting the foredge. It will first be necessary to ascertain whether the plough knife cuts exactly straight, that is, whether it cuts up or down. And the general criterion of this is to reverse the plough and place the eye close to the screw end of the knife, when, if the point of it falls exactly even with the level of the opposite cheek of the plough, it may be considered to be pretty correct. But if, after all, it should be found to cut up, it may be remedied by placing a small piece of paper between the knife and screw on the side next the point of the knife. But if it cuts down, by putting a similar piece on the reverse side. The book should now be opened in various places in order to find out the narrowest pages. Having done this, the compasses are extended from the edge of the back, on the title page side, to within a little of the edge of the narrow leaf. The book is now shut, and the compasses, being still kept in the same position, are again placed on the edge of the back, towards the head, and extended on the outer leaf, towards the foredge, where this arm of the compasses must make a visible dent. The same thing is now done towards the foot, and these two dents are the guides for placing one of the cutting boards, which, when used for this purpose, is called the runner. These boards are placed in the following manner. The backboard, against which the point of the knife cuts, is held in the left hand, while with the right the book is placed against it, the foredge of which must fall below the level of the board about an inch. The thumb and fingers hold these two firmly together, and with the right hand the edge of the runner is placed exactly even with the dents made in the foredge. The thumb of the left hand is now brought over this board also, and the whole must be held steadily, and in this position lowered into the press. The right hand at the same time adjusting the screws of the press, in such a way as to cause the cheeks to nip it just sufficiently tight to prevent its slipping. The left hand may now be taken away, and both thumbs being placed on each end of the runner, and the forefingers on the back board, the whole must be carefully worked down together, until the runner becomes exactly even with the cheek of the press, which must now be screwed up. But in doing this, it sometimes occurs that the side of the book next the backboard will, in a trifling degree, rise. When this is found to be the case, the right hand must be put under the press, and that side of the book must be gently pulled down. The press must now be screwed up rather tight, and the foredge ploughed, taking care that the knife always cuts from, never towards, the individual. The foredge should next be rubbed smooth with a portion of the shavings thus cut off, when the book may be taken out and is ready for the next operation, which is that of rounding. This process principally consists in forming a neat hollow down the foredge of the book, corresponding with the roundness of the back. Though for school books, consisting of only about half a dozen sheets, this is never attended to. But superior and thicker books, although only in sheep bindings, should invariably be rounded. Previous to doing this, the press must be reversed, otherwise the groove in which the plough works will be found a considerable obstruction. Having done this, the binder begins as follows. The book is laid on the press, and the edge of the back gently tapped with the hammer, the fingers being placed near where the hammer falls, and the thumb in the center of the foredge. As the hammer strikes, the thumb should press firmly, and the fingers at the same time gently pull towards it. The book should now be proceeded with in the same way on the other side, and should thus be alternately changed until the hollow be formed. The two sides of the foredge must then be placed even with each other, and nipped tight with the left-hand thumb and fingers. And while in this position, the back part of the book must be lowered in the press about 3 inches, and screwed tight, where it should remain 2 or 3 minutes, and when taken out, the foredge will be found to retain the hollow thus formed. It is now necessary to proceed to cutting the head and foot. The head must be ploughed before the foot, and the boards placed precisely in the same way as for the foredge, the backboard being put about an inch above the level of the head, and the runner just so far from it as will allow of a sufficient portion being cut off to bring the margin about equal to that of the foredge. This last board should be arranged as straight with the head as the eye will permit. Footnote. Beginners sometimes use a square. The reverse side to the title page is laid uppermost, and one portion of the square placed along the back, the other falling along the head. While in this position, a dent is made near the back and another near the foredge, which serves as a guide for the runner. End footnote. In putting the book in the press, the individual ploughing must take care to place the foredge towards him, and in screwing the book tight, the side next the backboard may probably rise. If so, this must be remedied in the same way as mentioned for the foredge. The method of arranging the boards, lowering the book, and cutting is precisely the same as before described. We shall now, therefore, presuming the head to be cut, give directions for cutting the foot. It may first be observed that more margin should always be left at the foot than at the head. The depth of the former should be about 1/2 greater than that of the latter, which can easily be managed, as books almost invariably have a deeper margin at the foot than at the head. But before compassing, the leaves should be looked through, to be certain that the book will really allow of such additional margin. Having ascertained this, the title page side of the book should be laid uppermost, and one arm of the compasses placed exactly on the edge of the head of the foredge side, and the other arm extended to the foot, when 2 or 3 leaves must be opened, in order that the pages themselves may be a guide for regulating the distance for extending the compasses. Having thus set them, the leaves are again shut, and a dent made with this arm of the compasses on the outer flyleaf. The same thing is next done towards the back. The backboard is then placed as already mentioned, and the runner even with the compass holes. The book is next lowered into the press with the left hand, the foredge being placed towards the individual, and the book is ploughed. 4 or 5 books may be cut by this method at a time, by knocking them up perfectly even with the one compassed, and always placing this last next the runner. The books are now ready for another process, which we shall defer describing until we have made some remarks on a sort of binding which we thought would be better suited to this place than any other, inasmuch as it could not properly be described until after we had spoken of cutting, and yet ought to precede the covering with leather. We allude to pamphlets, catalogues, etc. These kind of books have seldom any other than paper coverings. They are sewn and glued in the same way as bound books, and when dry, the bands are cut off nearly close to the backs. These short ends are then spread out, and the outer side of the second flyleaf is pasted, when the outer leaf must be rubbed pretty smooth upon it. The same thing is next done on the other side of the book. The opened strings are now to be pasted down, after which the paper for covering is lined in the center, pasted and put on, in the same way as that for boarded books. The lining and the two fly leaves being generally considered a sufficient substance for the covers. However, should these require to be stouter, the outer leaf is pasted, and a piece of paper, free from knots, or very thin pasteboard, is put upon it, which should be placed over the strings, and even with the back. The outer cover being put on, plates of tin, or pieces of glazeboard, are placed within and outside the covers, and the book is screwed tight in the press, where it should not remain more than a minute. It will then be necessary to plough it, precisely in the way we have described above, but care must be taken that the covers be perfectly dry first. Otherwise they will be found to shrink below the level of the book. This rule must be observed with all books that are cut what is termed flush, that is, not having projecting covers. It will be as well also in this place to say something of primers, etc. As these kind of books generally fall into the hands of children, the backs are usually made stronger, and the covers stouter than those of pamphlets. After the book is sewn, glued, and dry, the bands are cut off nearly close to the back, as above mentioned, and the fly leaves pasted, on which a piece of thin pasteboard is placed, very near the edge of the back, and smoothed with the hands. A strip of red sheep, according to the size of the back, is then pared on each side. For this purpose the binder has a small slab, or other stone, and a knife like those used by shoemakers. The strip must next be pasted with thick paste, after which the back is to be again glued, and a leather worked tight over it, which should extend on each pasteboard about half an inch. The paper intended for the outside is next pasted, and laid on just near enough the back to cover the join of the strip to the board. It is then rubbed smooth, after which the book is screwed tight in the press, and when dry may be cut. The edges of the books we have just named, and all such as are cut flush, are sometimes coloured, though very rarely, as they are generally sold at too cheap a rate to allow of this additional expense, which always immediately follows that of cutting, and is termed sprinkling. Law books are never subjected to this process, but remain precisely in the same state as when cut. It is, however, just the reverse with all other books with projecting covers, which are proceeded with as follows. If there be several already ploughed, and intended to be sprinkled with the same colour, they are placed on the ground, or work-board, side by side, with their foredges uppermost. The liquid now being prepared, a small brush is dipped into it. Footnote. For various mixtures for sprinkling, see the appendix. End footnote. But before using it on the books, the grosser portion of the liquid should be knocked from the brush. Otherwise it would fall on them in blotches. The books are then sprinkled by holding any kind of stick, or the press pin in the left hand, while the hair of the brush is gently tapped on it with the right, directly over the books, the hands continually moving, so that every leaf may be equally sprinkled. The books are now placed in the same way on their tails, and when the heads are sprinkled, the tails are placed uppermost, and proceeded with in the same way. There is also another method, which is termed colouring. For this process, the books are differently arranged from those for sprinkling. Half a dozen, or more, must be placed one above another. On the right-hand cheek of the press, their foredges perfectly even with each other, and also the press cheek itself. A board must be laid on the top one. The liquid now being in readiness, a piece of sponge is dipped into it, and while the left hand presses firmly on the board, the right must be employed in rubbing this sponge several times up and down the foredges. The heads must next be proceeded with in the same manner, and afterwards the tails. They will speedily dry. The better way, perhaps, for colouring is to screw the books tight in the press, for if the paper be of a spongy texture, the colour is apt to soak into it. In respect to the colours most suitable for sprinkling and colouring, we shall leave that to the discretion of the binder. The book having been sprinkled or coloured may now be considered ready for backing. We have so fully entered into the way by which this is done in our description of boarding, that nothing farther need be said in this place on the subject. It must, however, be observed that the back should be rubbed with thick paste, which must afterwards be wiped off with paper shavings, when the book is ready for putting on the boards. What has been already said on this subject is sufficient. It nevertheless may be as well to mention that more neatness is usually observed in cutting the boards, and in spreading and flattening the string of bound than of boarded books, the latter being intended, at some after period, for rebinding, which is never, or very rarely, the case with the former. We shall now proceed to covering. We have hitherto confined ourselves to sheep binding. We shall at present only speak of that leather. Previously to covering with sheep, whether red or pale, it should always be dipped in water, and slightly stretched with the hands. As the skins are very irregular, care should be taken to cut them to the best advantage. If there are many books of the same size to cover, a pasteboard pattern is usually made, about half an inch larger in circumference than the book itself, which will allow for turning in. This being laid on the skin enables the binder to cut it with the requisite accuracy. It is next necessary to pare the leather carefully round, after which it is to be pasted and lightly folded over, in which position it should lie a few minutes, so that the paste may slightly soak into it. The next thing is to glue the back afresh, and as the glue sets, the leather should be put on. The method of doing this is the same as covering a boarded book, but the leather must be worked on tightly with the fingers in all directions. The covers are next adjusted, the edges turned down, and the ends tucked in, as for boarding, and in again turning up the fold of the corners, as before mentioned. After cutting them, the head and foot corners must be neatly turned under the foredge fold on the cover, which should be done with the thumbnail. The edges of the covers should then be rubbed smooth with a folding stick, which must next be used for setting the head, in other words, making it smooth and neat, and when dry it will be found to retain the form thus given to it. If it be intended to sprinkle or marble the leather, it should be done now. The book is then ready for finishing. Footnote: for various recipes for sprinkling and marbling of leather, see the appendix. End footnote.